Welcome to our City Council Budget Development Meeting. Let's go ahead and have the roll call. Oh, we need it? Oh, we don't need it. Okay. Okay, that sounds great. So we will turn it over to Ashley Welch, our CFO, to get us through this meeting.
We are back. So Finance and Human Resources are going to present a little bit more for the budget development process. So I'm Ashley Welch, Chief Financial Officer.
Heather Buchanan, Human Resources Director.
All right, so we're going to cover the Qualified Education Assistance Reimbursement Program. We're going to go through the Reserve Review, Capital Improvement Fund, the CPI, and also just a little blurb about the rate study.
Here is my one slide. Okay, so this year we had 21 requests for education reimbursement. That can be for an associate's, bachelor's, master's, or higher level degree, compared to the 29 last year. The total requests this year total 73,000. The column in the green is what the current balance in each of those accounts are for educational funding. So right now, if there was no other money spent, we would only need 6,000 new additional dollars moved into these line items in fiscal year 21. However, spring semester is still going, and this is a reimbursement, so we will have a bunch of money come out in May when people finish up their classes and get grades. So the overall total cost would be 73,000. We do not anticipate needing to move 73,000, but we won't have a more clear picture until after the spring session has closed. So later on in the budget, Ashley will bring back the exact figure. I just wanted to let you know where we were sitting with requests this year, and especially compared to last. So it is down slightly.
Yeah, so last year I presented what each department had for their savings, and then so what we actually needed to budget them to move into that fund. So all the education is now paid out of one fund. It used to be paid out of all departments. So we kind of decided to put all that. It's easier to track, easier to look at, so it's all in a separate fund only used for education. All right, so I am just going to go over some of the reserve review. We will, you will see all the other funds when they're doing their presentations. You will see if they have any excess reserves. I just wanted to show you what was available in the tax funds so that you kind of have an idea before we get into the budgeting process. So excess reserves, you remember the reserve policy requires tax funds to have 25% of the next year's budget. So we're going off of 2020 budget numbers. That's the budget numbers that we have. So whatever's in reserves at the end of fiscal year 19, we need 25% of fiscal year 20's budget set aside for potential costs. One of the reasons why we did 25% is because the property taxes, the big remittances, only come in twice a year. So we wanted to make sure that we had enough money in the bank to cover the time when we're kind of low on the cash end. So surprisingly, the general fund has an excess of $176,000. Why I say surprisingly is because we just moved the 4.5 million over. So to me, this shows people are being very fiscally responsible in the general fund. They're putting money back. That means that the property taxes that we took more than covered our operations, or we maybe received additional revenue. So I was actually surprised that the general fund has a little bit to spend. And remember that excess reserves are available for use on one-time, generally capital needs. We can use them for other one-time purchases. So you can see the street fund has excess reserves, and that is also taken into account any budget amendments that passed in December, because I know that some of the departments use reserves. The recreation fund is still short that 25%. We're working on kind of building that up. We did move the zoo from the general fund into recreation, so that kind of hindered them building those. Cemetery fund has excess, airport, library, and then our workers' compensation fund, our reserve requirement for that one is 1.5 million, just for potential claims that we may have. So we're getting closer and closer every year to building that. One of the things that we're going to bring back, hopefully at a future meeting, is the workers' compensation experience rating, which is the percent. I believe we're at 70%. We just checked it. Yeah. And so eventually we'd like to see that get closer to the 100% range, but we will bring those back to you at a future meeting.
So the workers' comp fund, though, is intentionally low. I mean, you could say all of them are intentionally where they are, but the workers' comp, we knew that for several budget cycles.
And we've been slowly building towards that.
So what I'm saying is, more so than any other, we've intentionally been building.
Absolutely,
towards
yes,
that.
we've had a plan in place. I think the last 2 years we've increased the experience rating. We did a budget amendment, I know for liability fund, had excess reserves that we moved into workers' comp. Gosh, I think just a few years ago we were like minus 900,000. So we've built it up a lot over the last 2 to 3 years. So that's something that we've been really focusing on and making a priority. So we've made good
In
progress.
some ways, it could be the most volatile of all those
Absolutely.
areas.
Especially with some of the legislation on the books now, we really need to make sure that we're closer to that 100.
Any questions on those? And you'll see these during the budget process. Every fund will present if they have excess reserves to be able to be used for some of their requests that they're asking. So you'll see those again. But I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of where we were at for the tax funds. So it was everyone's doing a very good job at managing their funds, and recreation grew too. So they were able to build those reserves just a little bit at a time.
And maybe we ought to comment on workers' comp again. We're self-insured to a certain point.
Yes.
And I don't know that
We have excess policies, but normal day-to-day.
we have a big umbrella.
Yeah, so we're not on the state unemployment
State.
plan.
State comp plan.
Yeah, we have our own.
Right. And it's worked well.
Yeah, and we analyze that and make sure that it's still, is it worth it to keep it here or should we go out? We're always looking at that and making sure that it's in the best interest of the city to keep that self-funded.
That was going to be my question.
Yes,
So you constantly monitor
Yes.
that?
Quarterly.
Okay.
Quarterly.
And that is always like, it tips in favor of being self-funded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And if we ever get to a point where it's, we will bring that to you. But yeah, we have quarterly meetings. We go over the numbers and kind of see where everything's sitting. So it is definitely in our best interest to stay that way.
Okay.
Ashley?
Yeah.
This is just an educate me question. I know with school districts, there's also a recommended reserve, but most districts exceed that. And I'm just wondering, I think I'm understanding that 25% is the legal requirement for the city.
That's per the city policy. That's what we put into place at the end of fiscal year 16.
So that includes a safety net in
Yes.
addition to what is legally
Yes.
required. And do you continue to feel that is sufficient, that 25% is
Yes,
sufficient?
and some of the research that I've done and the trainings that I've gone to, 3 months is 2 to 3 months is the general consensus. I don't believe that there is a state mandated. You don't have to have an amount. That is what the council set up at the
Right.
end of 2016, and I feel like 25% is a good conservative
Okay.
amount to have in there.
And,
Yes.
and I mean, and my question was really headed toward, in your best judgment, does that really keep us safe, or do we need to think about increasing that? And I'm happy
Yes.
to go with your judgment.
Yes, I think right now we're good. I mean, we can always analyze that depending on kind of what's going on in the economy and everything. I think right now 25% is more than sufficient. I feel like we're really conservative on that. Any other questions on this?
Sales tax revenue goes
Yes.
into general fund?
Correct. Yep. All franchise fees go into the general fund as well. All right, so capital improvement fund, we've been working on building up this balance for the last couple of years. We used to levy for this within the general fund, and we looked up some legislation, and a lot of cities have their own capital improvement fund, which you actually can levy for separately. So we went through the process of setting all of that up so that we could have a fund strictly for capital improvements. So last year, the last 3 years, I think we've put about $1 million in there for capital projects. These are for any projects that come up. We can make plans during the budgeting cycle to use that, which I know we did last year with some of the recreation items. We also, I just wanted to note that the Fairground Sewer Improvement Project was completed in fiscal year 20. So when you see these balances, it'll go, the not assigned balance will go down by about $381. But all of that property tax, or $381,000, sorry. I misspoke. Wouldn't it be nice if it was $381?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Back to that. If we segregate what we do between enterprise funds and tax funds, how do we pay that amount out of tax funds?
Enterprise funds are not included in
Well,
this.
but isn't sewer an enterprise fund?
It was a new service, which
Okay.
cannot, do you remember when we voted on that? Because it was new and not existing, thank you.
Okay.
We cannot use user fees for new.
Okay.
Yes, and so the city decided to help pay for that fairgrounds sewer improvement project to help the Northgate district build. So that was the consensus, and we did have to use tax money for that because of it being new.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so here's the fund review. I'm not gonna go through everything, but you can see that this is the beginning of FY20. The only big project that I've seen out of there is that $381,000 to finish that sewer project that kind of rolled into the next year. So you can see, I keep a spreadsheet of this. Also part of our financial policies that we passed gave us the direction that if there's any additional capital left in the budget, so let's say police had budgeted for $200,000 in capital, but they weren't able to make any purchases, we moved that into this fund because when we went through the budgeting process, we said they need that much in capital, we need to keep it in capital. I know when I first started, we were having a pretty big capital crisis because we were trying to cut the budget, and that's kind of where everyone would go. So it was very important that we put that policy into place. So any additional capital we move over into this fund. That's why there's so many departments and that you'll see in there. There are some that we set aside money for specific projects, but the not assigned, those are all the things that have to come to council for like the capital contingency part of it. So if a department wants to use that money, generally they present in a work session and ask for council approval to be able to use that. So you'll have that slide. We also have a little bit, you'll see the Brady Chapel at the bottom. Any of the donations that come in for that, we just keep track of it in this fund. It's just a little bit easier tracking for us.
Just a general question that came up at an advisory committee meeting. So can a city advisory committee do any active fundraising, or do they have to have a 501c3 like Friends of? And how does that work? Because there seemed to be some confusion.
It makes
much.
it really difficult when the city has to take donations and use them for specific projects, because that's not really what we were set up for. It is a lot nicer if the committee can do it on their own because it's cleaner. We have done some of that in the past, but I think it's a bigger process for us to go to take those and make sure that everything's spent appropriately, potentially do budgeting amendments and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot easier for the organization to do it themselves.
But it's not impossible. I mean, so
not.
if somebody says, we'd like to give you 10 grand, we should not necessarily say no.
Yeah, I know like the biggest project that we've done in the past was the Creekside Bike Stop. All those donations came into the
Right.
city, and it was just kind of it was hard to track.
Sure.
We tried to put it all in the same fund to make it easier, and then it was even harder to get all the documentation we needed to pay those out.
Right.
But it is possible, yes.
And the more general, the better. So here's X number of dollars versus here's X number of dollars that can only be spent on.
CASLOX.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
Right,
Okay.
like an animal service donation
Right.
or, yes.
Okay.
Does that
Thank you.
answer your question?
Yeah.
Will you remind us what the 2,000 is in the mayor council?
It was, so I believe it was for a future vehicle way down the road. So departments usually bring these within their presentations to say, hey, we would like to put away this much money for potential capital purchases. Whether it's, and usually that's for a department vehicle replacement.
How to be specific to, maybe to mayor and council, what, I know Tom has spoken about, vehicle requirements, police, fire have spoken about, yes, we need this vehicle because blah, blah, blah. Do we have, for anyone in our city who has a private vehicle, so to speak, even though I know it's not private, but a vehicle assigned just to them, do we have any criteria? Because obviously, police, fire, equipment.
Are you talking about the take-home vehicle policy?
Yeah, so that, I could go get, a BMW, or I could get a Volt,
So those
how
purchases
is that-
generally go before the council.
But it's just up to our discretion based on,
As far as I know, we don't have an actual policy in place for how much you can spend on a particular vehicle.
right, or what justifications are required or anything like that.
Right. Do you need a truck versus a car?
Right, and again, I'm exempting anybody whose equipment requirements are evident based on
Right.
the job that they're doing. I'm just, okay, thank you.
Yep. Anything else? All right. So, yeah.
I don't know, maybe this is a silly question, but
You're fine.
the Brady Chapel Fund is a little lower than what I thought it was. I thought it was over 5,000, and I know that sounds piddly, but
This is as of the end of fiscal year 19. There
Okay.
have been donations in fiscal year
Okay.
20.
because then they were looking at getting the match from the
Yes.
Heritage Trust, and this is a little below where I thought we were.
Yes, so I had done a little bit of analysis, and there were donations for fiscal year 20, and we can bring an updated amount if you need
Okay,
that.
because I was
Yeah.
thinking it was getting closer to 6. but-
And looking at just kind of glancing through it, it sounds about right.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I just wanted to go over the CPI for you. We just got these updated numbers. We're working on tasking department heads to get their service level reports to us. So you'll see in there, and we will be presenting those as part of the budgeting process, but it kind of shows like the CPI over the years, and so like where their budget was 5 years ago as to where their budget is now with the CPI, what their actual increase is. So it does show that, but the 6-year increase is 8.39%. It was relatively flat for quite a while, and it just keeps going up every year. So the inflation for the current year is 1.76%. From October.
Did we find out if CPI
Yeah.
included health insurance?
It does not.
It does too. I read on the.
We looked at the labor,
No, I looked it up and I found the full description and it said healthcare is included.
What's your source?
on the labor
It was a
website, it
government
says
site.
no.
Labor Department or something like
That's
that.
what I looked at.
That's
It
what
said
we looked at.
Well, there could be a difference talking about the cost of healthcare versus healthcare premiums. So
Yeah.
that might be something
Well,
we need to-
healthcare insurance is what it said. Okay, I don't know.
I'm not wading into the argument, I'm
I
just
know,
saying there's two
but it
different
said
reports you
healthcare
can be looking
insurance.
at.
I'll provide it to
Well,
you.
and there are a lot of different, we use the CPIU, the urban, so I know that there's a whole bunch of different charts out there. I know it's like 160 something pages if you print the whole report, so I'm not sure if they're different and if they include different items.
How do we settle that? I mean, so that we know, as we look at increases, we know what goes into those increases. How do we
We can look at it and we
Get
can
it.
bring it back at another
expert
meeting.
conclusion?
Yeah, we can, Heather and I will research that, and when we present again, we can give you that
This
information.
one says
Thank you.
medical, that includes medical care.
Yeah, we'll present
Yeah.
that.
Because
Thank
Heather,
you.
what, just so that we can look at it, you said there were two different things, medical, like health care.
There's healthcare costs and then there's health insurance premiums.
And
Sometimes those are separate items that we
Okay.
talk about as a singular thing.
okay.
And if you're looking, we always use October's numbers because that's the beginning of our fiscal year. That's just past practice. That's kind of what we've done. So that's where these numbers are. If you go out and try to find where we got them.
Okay.
Are you looking at regional or national?
National. Yep. Any other questions on this slide? Okay, the last thing we have is the utility rate study. We did just go through this 5-year budget plan last year. Lots of input from the enterprise funds. We do pay for consultants to help us put this plan together. So we have a plan for the next 5 years. I noted the fee increases for 2021 on there. These are based on the increase in expenditures will be budgeted to complete expected capital projects. So they take any capital needs over the 5-year plan. Also, I think they even look into the future to see kind of what we're going to need and what they believe our reserve level should be to meet the customer demands for service. So the increases are 3%, 4%, and 3%, and those have carried pretty steady over, I believe, the last 5 years. So we pay to have this plan done. There is a lot of research and calculations that go into it. So when we build the budget, we're following this plan. So generally, when you have an increase for, let's say, water personnel, it is in the utility rate plan, because they're saying, you're going to be offering this much, and so you're going to need an additional person to be able to offer that service to your citizens. So we follow this. I don't know, it's like pretty lengthy, but there's a lot of research that goes into it. So we pay a lot of money for it. We choose to follow this. Just wanted to.
I was just wondering, because, when we were doing the new rate study, we had an in-depth presentation from that consultant. Is that presentation something that our new members could see? Because if you wanted to get into the detail, he gave that all to us.
Yeah, if we
Thank you.
we can find that.
Didn't know that was there.
Yeah, we got a very detailed presentation and showing how, certain projects money is built in to do those, and
Right, and they go through a lot of iterations, like if we do this rate, this is what you'll have, and so, it's pretty in-depth, and we work with them for months.
Yes.
And so, yeah, if we can get you that presentation, I think it would help to explain a little bit about how those rates are set and kind of why they're at those percentages.
Right.
But it's a lot of employee input, it's a lot of the consultant's input as to what they see. So,
and then some from us on things we wanted to make sure got done, like sewering Johnny Creek.
yes, and so there was this year, that hasn't been done before, capital savings only for enterprise funds, but that is just contained within their fund. So it doesn't mix with the tax funds. They have their own capital improvement.
Okay, that was what I was going to ask.
Yes, so that isn't included on here. That, I believe, WPC started in 2021, and I think water will start putting in 2020, and then I think water will start putting in 2021. I'd have to go back and check it, but they're going to start putting in money so that we have that money for potential projects. All right, that is all that we have for you. We do plan to present again. We plan to bring back the fuel rate. We generally bring that to council. Tom usually helps us kind of go over, and we decide what rate we want to set for city fuel for the year, so that we can start that budgeting process, because it does affect almost every department. So that's kind of one of the first things that we like to do. So we'll bring that back to you. We're also going to bring back new personnel, workers' comp experience, just to kind of go over that. Is there anything else? I'm trying to remember. I have them all written down in there. Yeah, and we can look up the CPI and bring that back as well, that presentation. So, but those are the things that we are going to be bringing back. Do you have any questions on what we presented today, or? No? Okay.
Other than thank you.
No, thank you. I'm trying to give you little bits of information instead of overwhelming you, so I hope that it's helpful.
It is.
Because the budgeting process will start the end of April and all of May, and it gets pretty intense. So just starting you out light.
Appreciate
Thank you for that information.
Yep.
With that, our budget meeting is adjourned.